I think we may go ahead and get started. Anita, do you have anybody, or Ashley, I'm sorry, do you have anybody on the phone trying to get in or having any trouble that you know of?
I think somebody's on, but I've asked them to please join in on the WebEx because I'm not getting any responses to who it is.
Okay. Okay. We may wait just another second or two.
Okay.
Hello? Hello? Again? Right. That sounds like
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the October 7th meeting of the Missouri Solid Waste Advisory Board, and we are meeting via WebEx, which is, it's good. It's good to see everybody other than just voices. So special thanks to staff for putting this together, and thanks to everyone that's calling in and either calling in or WebExing in. A few, as they say, housekeeping matters. We ask that you speak clearly and that you mute if you're not speaking. We'll mute everyone, and then you'll need to unmute when you speak. And also, if you would please, before you speak, state your name and the district or your affiliation, especially if you're making a motion or a second, so that we can capture that. Thank you very much. And we will call the roll. District A, Debbie Roach. District B, Jack Hodge.
Ann Hamilton,
District
voting
C.
alternate.
Ann?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. District C, Mark Thompson. District D, Kyle White. District E, Marie Steiner.
Chris Bussin.
All right. Thank you. District F, Jim Markham.
Voting alternate, Megan Huth.
Thank you. District G, Alan Wyatt.
Ashley Long, voting alternate.
Thank you. District H, Barbara Buffalo.
Leland Rehard, voting alternate.
Thank you, Leland. District I, Lon Little.
Stephanie Norton, voting alternate.
Thank you. District J, Brad True.
Michelle Slater, voting alternate.
Thank you. District K, Brady Wilson. Victor Stratman. District L, Eric Larson. Dave Berger. District M, Joe Harden. Patty Overman. District N, Scott Sterrett. Natalie Mosley. District O, Eric Roberts.
Here.
Okay, thank you. It's getting kind of lonely out there. District P, Gary Collins.
Sarah Callahan, voting alternate.
Thank you, Sarah. District Q, Jean Oakley.
Crystal Jones, voting alternate.
Thank you, Crystal. District R, Martin Toma.
Becca PQ, voting alternate.
Thank you, Becca. District S, Kent Hampton.
Kent Luke, voting alternate.
Thank you, Kent. District T, Tom Wright.
Megan England, voting alternate.
Thank you, Megan. From the industry, Casey Powers. Tim Curry. Daniel Buckley. All right. Representing public, Carolyn Weiscarver, Melinda Black, Barbara Lux, I am here. Representing recycling, David Beal, John Pius. All right.
I'm here. Dave Beal's here.
Thank you, David. And staff present, we have Chris and Anita and Ashley and Rick. Who have I missed there? And others. Who else might be there? All right. Our quorum is 13, which we have. So we are good to go. You have received an agenda, and if you would, please take a look at that, and I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Becca PQ, District R, will make a motion.
All right, I was going to say, please state your name. Thank you.
Ann Hamilton, second.
All right, thank you, Ann. Those in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed, please say no. All right, the agenda is approved. You also received the meeting summary from our August 5th meeting. And if you have had time to review that, I would entertain a motion to approve those meeting notes.
Barbara, this is Chris Bussin. I'll move to approve the meeting notes.
Thank you. And a second?
Dave Beal, I'll second.
Thank you, Dave. Those in favor of approval, please say yes.
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 Anyone opposed with no? All right, the meeting notes are approved. We're going to have, I think, a very interesting presentation today. Make sure Lisa McDaniel is here. Is Lisa there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. You're not right on, there you are. We're going to hear an update on the Missouri Product Stewardship Council. And that has a very nice ring to it, by the way. Lisa is part of a group that's been working on this, and we're very interested. Take it away, Lisa.
Sure. Well, this is really more of an update than a presentation. I think I spoke to everybody last spring where I sort of talked about the goals of the Missouri Product Stewardship Council and the priority products that we were working on, which includes paint, pharmaceuticals, and mattresses. And since we last spoke, we did have a very successful and well-attended paint summit, which was really kind of fun. It included a virtual tour of a paint recycling facility in Illinois. We've been moving on to pharmaceuticals, and we are getting ready to host a pharmaceutical stakeholder meeting next week, October 14th and 15th. So far, we have about 70 registered for this meeting. And our goal from this meeting is to sort of define the problems that are caused by leftover drugs and identify opportunities, barriers, and potential solutions for implementing a pharmaceutical stewardship program. In preparation for this meeting, we've developed a couple of fact sheets that are one of them is designed to get out to the public to sort of let them know what some of their preferred options are for dealing with these wastes. And I don't know, do I have the ability to share my screen, Ashley? Okay. One of the things we've been working on, and it's really kind of cool. Let's see. I don't know if there it is. So we've been working on this interactive map And we've been working with the Missouri Spatial Data Information Service, and we thank them for their assistance in pulling this all together. So it would allow anyone who's got some old medicines that they want to get rid of to find a location near them. The blue dots, I think, represent law enforcement drop-off options, which would be drop boxes in like sheriff department lobbies. I think the red is, let me just click on one here. Those are pharmacies that offer take-back options. And then I believe the green are drop-off options that are located within health facilities. So, I think it's a great tool for Missouri residents to be able to go onto this site to find a drop-off near them. And we've also included locations that are just sort of outside the borders of the state, so that if someone, doesn't have one near them within the state, perhaps they can make, take advantage of one that's located outside the state. Okay. So go back. So some of the speakers that we have lined up for our stakeholder meeting include someone from Poison Control, Department of Health and Senior Services, the Board of Pharmacies, Covanta, which is a incinerator, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So it's still not too late to register for this meeting. If you can come for both days or just for a limited amount of time, feel free to join us, and we hope you can. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? I have been sitting in on there's a master series in product stewardship, and there's a series of 4 webinars. We had our 3rd webinar this morning, and I've been sitting in on that, and it is fascinating. It's attended. It's an international group that's sponsoring it, and so it's attended by representatives in 40 or 50 countries, several hundred people, and there's a lot of discussion about what's going on in various programs around the world. It's very interesting, very interesting. Thank you, Lisa. You can keep us up to date. Reports. Let's start with Chris. Program update. Anything going on, Chris?
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Chris Noggle, Director of the Waste Management Program. Glad everybody was able to join us, and hope that you're finding WebEx to work well for you today. As far as program updates, got several items that I wanted to update you on, several things I wanted to update you on. We'll start off with the Solid Waste Advisory Board's work group on solid waste management plan update and diversion calculation update. We've been in discussions with the Office of Administration on the draft contract. After those discussions, we were going to add some additional revisions to the scope of the contract to help better define it, basically give it a little bit more focus. Selection process right now. If there's any additional questions on that, or if you have interest in participating on that work group, please just reach out to Greg Snellen at the program. We'd be happy to help you as far as providing any additional information, or if you'd like to be a part of that work group, he'd be happy to add you to the base camp and get you on there so you receive the notifications. Also, we had our TAR grant call earlier this year. The application period closed at the end of June. We had 30 non-playground grants and 42 playground grant applications received. We made the award announcements back in August 25th. We had 21 playground grants and 18 non-playground grants that were awarded for a total amount just over $932,000. So we're definitely looking forward to those. The financial assistance period did start a little bit later than what it normally does. It ended up starting on September 1st this year, and it'll also run a little bit longer in order to help accommodate some of the challenges that schools have had with COVID. So rather than running for 12 months, it'll run for a period of 14 months. If there's any additional questions or you'd like to get further information on that, you can reach out to Debbie Ickes with our program, and she'd be happy to provide you additional information. Recycling trends. Please continue to share articles and information of interest with the Solid Waste Advisory Board. You can send those to either my attention or Ashley's, and we'll be happy to get those distributed out to the board members and the rest of the Solid Waste Advisory Board group. So, like I said, if you see interesting articles or things that you think might be of benefit, please make sure and pass those along to us. Rule updates. Not a lot of changes on the rules. Chapter 3, we've gotten draft language put together, and we've got that in internal review right now with our management. Also, we've got Chapter 2 definitions. That's also in internal review with our management as well. Hopefully we'll be able to get that language approved here before too long and start having some internal stakeholder discussion, or excuse me, informal stakeholder discussions, basically to start discussing that draft language and start moving forward on those rules. Once that is done, we'd like to follow up on the Chapter 2 permitting rule and provide some updates on that, as well as on Chapter 5 and Chapter 7 related to the process facilities and infectious waste rules. For today, I still have a pending question that I'd like to get some feedback from the board on, and that's related to the 10 CSR 80 Chapter 9, the 905 District Grant Rule. As everybody's aware, we had brought this before the Solid Waste Advisory Board back last year, and the guidance we got was to hold off on the rulemaking until we saw what the Joint Committee on Solid Waste Management District Operations might do. Now that the Joint Committee has expired, the question still remains, what would the board like us to do on this? I would like to propose that we restart our informal stakeholder discussions and start reviewing the language again. But before I do that, I would like to see what the board's recommendation is on that, and basically get some feedback on that. So the board doesn't necessarily have to take it up right now, but if you would, please consider that. And like I said, I'd like to renew those discussions if everybody's agreeable. Regarding pre-filing of bills, that'll begin the first week in December. And then the first day of session is going to be January 8th of 2021. So it's not too far off. Since the last meeting in August, I've had a few questions that have come to my attention related to just general budget issues, budget-related type questions. Many of those questions were just terminology and the general budget process. So I thought it'd probably be a good time just to go ahead and just touch on that a little bit, discuss some of the terminology, make sure everybody understands what the meanings are, and give you just a very brief preview, or not a preview, but just an overview of how the budgetary process works and so forth. So if you bear with me, this will take a couple minutes. Some of the terminology that I've heard that's been kind of tossed out and used in different ways, not always accurately, relates to some of the terms that we see every day in the budget process. One is the statutory allocation, basically how funds are to be distributed as set forth in a statute. So when you hear the term allocation, it's just a statutory reference to how money is to be broken up and used. For example, we have a statutory allocation that is addressed in the tonnage fees. It basically that statute explains how the fees will be broken up when they're received and what portions of that funding will go to different entities, whether it be the solid waste districts, whether it be EIER, whether it be department, etc. So that's a statutory allocation. It's basically just a description of how you're going to chop up the funds. Here's an important term that oftentimes is kind of confused, and it's appropriation. As part of the budget process, there's a devoting of funds to special purposes, basically the authorization of different funds for specific uses. That's an appropriation. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail right after I go through the definition of disbursement. So whenever you hear somebody talk about dispersing funds, that's actually the actual payment where money is going out to an entity. So it's money is leaving a particular fund and going out for use. So when you pull all this together and you look at how the state budget approval process works, you have an appropriation, and that appropriation is an approved amount in an agency's budget that is provided by both the fund and the category type. And this allows an agency to spend those funds that have been received up to that approved appropriation amount during that fiscal year. An example is for the 0570 fund. This is the solid waste tonnage fees. That fund has a category known as PSD. That category is the appropriation that allows for funds to be sent to the department, from the department to the solid waste management districts. The act of sending those funds out, that is the disbursement. So appropriation amounts are typically set based on a past average of actual expenses for that particular fund in that category. The legislature, they monitor the appropriations and the expenditures, and they attempt to keep these amounts in line with the actual past expenditures. The reason why they do that is to avoid excess appropriation authority. As a reminder, agency budgets are proposed by the governor through his recommendation to the legislature, and then the legislature reviews and authorizes those proposed budgets in budget bills. The legislature may raise, lower, or strike the proposed appropriations. The budget approval process is a coordinated effort between the executive and the legislative branches, often requiring negotiation. So a disbursement. A disbursement then is the actual process of paying out funds to an entity, such as the solid waste management districts for subgrants or district operations. A disbursement must comply with the approved appropriation amounts for that fiscal year. So as part of a budgetary process, we have to receive adequate appropriation in order to spend the funds that are received through the payment of tonnage fees. Once those funds are received, we receive appropriation. We are then allowed to disperse the funds out to entities for use. Another question that I heard that came up was, is a tonnage fee fund sweep possible? The short answer of that is the only way that there could be a sweep of the current tonnage fee funds is if there is a statutory change. The current statute does not allow monies in the fund to lapse to general revenue. And if you want to see the specific language on that, that's in 260.330, subsection 3. And basically what that subsection says is the provisions of section 33.080 to the contrary notwithstanding, monies in the account shall not lapse to general revenue at the end of each biennium. That language is what prevents those funds from being swept and put into general revenue. So, to answer the question on could there be a fund sweep, not under current statutory language. It would require a legislative act that's changed statute in order for that to occur. These are just a few of the questions that I heard since the last meeting, so I wanted to touch on them a little bit and just kind of hopefully provide a little bit more clarity into the meaning of the terms that are used as part of the budgetary process, as well as to address the question about fund sweeps. I know a lot of people are concerned about that. So with that said, that's all I have for my update, and I would entertain any questions that you all have. Thank you.
Questions for Chris? We appreciate the budget 101. Thank you.
Barbara, this is Chris Benson. I did have one comment. Chris brought up the Chapter 9 changes, which for anybody who's been through the packets is actually one of the attachments. I think it's attachment C on the annual report. I'm not sure that what the rest of the board members believe, but I don't really see any reason to delay working on these changes anymore. I think it's been maybe a year and a half or 2 years since we started that process, and I know that COVID has interrupted 8 months of it. Not getting the joint committee reinstated was another 6 months. You know, I don't really. I guess I'm proposing that we ask Chris to proceed with the process as it was designed before all of the interruptions took place. So that's all I have.
Okay, and I think we're going to be addressing that when we start talking about the legislative priorities, I think.
Okay.
I think we're all in agreement here.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, both Chris's. Any other questions or comments? All right. Rick?
Yeah,
would you
hi,
like to
everybody.
talk about money?
Okay, yeah, yesterday you should have got the fourth quarter allocations for fiscal year 2020. Bit of good news on that. And the reason it took a little longer for us to publish it is $500,000 were deposited to a wrong account, and we had to get that moved to the 570 fund. We got that accomplished, and overall for the year, for 2020, we was up almost 800,000 compared to 2019.
Wow.
So that's all I got to report.
That's quite a report. Do we have any specific idea as to why it's up that much?
I could make guesses, but they'd just be guesses. I think with COVID taking effect and people staying at home more, maybe produce more trash, less recycling. That's, like I said, that's my guess. I can't point to anything specific though. Chris, could you?
No, I think you're correct, Rick. This is Chris. You know, like everybody's aware, recycling was struggling quite a bit with just the general issue of contamination rates and trying to minimize contamination. And then with the hit of COVID, it really just kind of unspooled everybody's efforts to try to really move forward on recycling. So I think that's a big chunk of it. You know, that is some speculation, but I think that's educated speculation. So, you know, if anybody else has other thoughts on that or other ideas, I'd definitely like to hear them. But in general, I think that's what we're seeing is just a lot of material that may have previously been diverted is now ending up in the landfill.
As I understand it, construction has, at least from what I have seen and what I've heard, construction has pretty much kept going. And I'm wondering if C&D isn't a part of that too.
Very likely, Barbara.
Had been a slowdown there.
Yeah, and I think you and I had talked about just the residential waste as well. A lot of people are home right now. They look at their garage, they look at their house, and they think it's spring cleaning. And I think there's probably record rates of material that's getting cleaned up out of residential areas and apartments and stuff. And some of that's, you know, ended up in the waste stream as opposed to being recycled as well.
Okay, as usual, there's the good news and the bad news. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Miss Angie, do we have a Mora update?
Yeah, it's basically the same information that I gave this morning during the planners meeting. Sorry, I'm just on the phone today. The Mora conference was postponed until April 6th through the 8th of 2021, keeping our fingers crossed. Basically the same program. Our new early registration deadline will be February 5th. Reminding everybody that if you are a Mora member, the Board of Directors election closes this afternoon. You should have received an email and a chance to vote via email or SurveyMonkey. We have extended our awards program probably till the end of the year. So if you have in this case, just a program that's been able to stay the course, I think that's noteworthy. But, keep that in mind. It's a good chance to recognize valuable programs or individuals or businesses. Waste 360 also has an awards program open right now, the 40 Under 40 Award. Its deadline is November 13th. We continue working on market development research as we're talking about just the need for end markets. So we're continuing on from the Kansas City study that we did in 2019 and looking at Springfield and Joplin and getting ready to start the Central Missouri region. So as we enter your region, we will contact the appropriate solid waste planner in that area just to kind of let them know and kind of coordinate, who we're going to contact and get some background information from them as well on the area. Continue to work with EPA, Mark Solid Waste Management District, the IERA on a set of webinar series on market development as well. Again, we all know the importance of that these days, now more than ever. November 15th is America Recycles Day. Probably a lot of virtual education events. Anxious to see if collection events, I think some of those are starting to happen again. So we'll see what we can come up with for America Recycles Day. If you're having any events, please let us know. And in our newsletters, we always promote our webinars. There's several every week, it seems like. I really wanted to point out, I think Anita had sent us the ones from EPA, but October 19th is the new international requirements for exports and imports of plastics. It's the 19th of October, and then we'll be again on November 23rd. I think that will be really interesting, and anxious to hear from some of the brokers on the impact of that.
Very good. Any questions or comments for Angie? All right. Angie, thank you very much.
Yes, thanks, Barb.
Planners update, Tammy Snodgrass, and I want to thank Tammy again for pulling this group together and chairing the meetings. Sat in on it this morning, and I really appreciate the planners taking the time, and I appreciate Tammy coordinating those.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. We met this morning, and before I forget about it, I want to extend an invitation to all the SWAB board at the November planners meeting, and we will probably start a little earlier than usual. We'll start at 10 o'clock. It will be a virtual meeting, but we are going to start the meeting with a presentation from Revolution Systems. This is a company that had a booth at last year's MORA conference. If you attended that, you may have noticed them. But they have an interesting, kind of unique approach to MRFs, and they sell equipment, but they had a small model at their booth that I found pretty interesting. They've done some more innovative things since last year that they were hoping to share with the group. We don't usually have kind of sales presentations, but these folks are doing some kind of unique things that I thought were worth sharing, especially in smaller districts. It might be beneficial. So everybody will receive information. We have been doing our meetings via Zoom, but I think they have a different platform that they use for their virtual presentation. So all of that information, I will make sure that it goes to the SWAB members as well as the planners. But I just wanted to let you know that the SWAB board was more than welcome to sit in on this presentation that we're going to get on this Revolution Systems company. Today we talked about the challenges of COVID and moving projects along when we have to observe social distancing, and there's lots of issues with getting into the school districts or meeting with larger groups. And we just basically did a roundtable and talked about what different districts were doing. There's several districts that are kind of moving their education programs into virtual formats. Some folks talked about doing videos and doing their own YouTube channel for that. In a lot of cases, we had, in my particular district, we had just had a lot of success with doing illegal dump cleanups in the national forest with large groups. I mean, like big organizations. And we had really great success with that in February, and then COVID hit. And so we had to back off doing those kinds of illegal dump cleanups. But what we have found is that people are still interested in doing that. They're just doing it in small groups in, you know, their little bubbles. So we have been supporting efforts. People have contacted us and wanted to do cleanups on public lands. And so we've provided them with equipment and trash bags, and we pay for the dumpsters and the pickup of any items that can be recycled, like tires, appliances, metals, things like that. So smaller scale, but still moving forward. So we had a pretty good discussion on that. Different ideas for what, you know, I had been getting some questions from some of the other districts about what we were doing. And we just kind of had a share session on ideas. Let's see. And then we just talked about potential topics for future discussions. And I encourage the other districts to come prepared to talk about any unique programs that they've got going in their districts, any projects that they're having really good success with that they want to share with everybody else. And then we decided we would leave the challenges of COVID as a standing agenda item, and we'll see how that transpires over the coming months. And another good discussion was, you know, we've had a lot of recycling or compost related companies or programs that are struggling, but at the same time, there are others that are really booming, who have really seen opportunity and are taking advantage of that. And so we're going to try to pull some information together on that and have a discussion on those, the opportunities that are still out there despite COVID. Another topic, and I had not heard anything about this yet, was chemical recycling for plastics. So that's another upcoming topic that we'll be having in the next few months. It's a brand new thing that I have no information on, but we're going to try to get more information on and share. And that was about it. Like I said, I just want to encourage folks, if they're interested in this kind of compact, different way to run a MRF program that we're going to have next month, you're certainly welcome to join us. And that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions.
Tammy, this is Chris Besson. Did the planners, have you guys had any discussions about recycling curbside programs statewide that have either stopped or paused?
I mean, it's come up a little bit. For instance, I mean, Brady could speak to this more than I could, but in my community, it paused for just a week or two because we send our materials to Rolla, which is the Rolla Recycling Center, and they did have to pause their services for a week or two. Like I said, Brady can give you more information on that, but they are back to providing services again. So in my district, at least, there have been some hiccups, but nothing that's been permanent.
Other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, Tammy. SWAB updates. SWAB members, does anyone have anything that they'd like to share? And that may be a piece of information that you might want to talk about in your own districts if you do have something that has been more than temporarily paused. Anyone have anything to share?
Barbara, this is Chris again. I've just got one announcement. We had a request for proposals out on the street for a transfer station. Our city council has decided to reject those responses and ask staff to redraft, or actually to draft, a request for qualifications. So last Tuesday, we sent out an RFQ for companies to propose what they're calling a mini transfer station. They're mostly looking to serve the citizens and small business as opposed to the Packer trucks. I don't really know what the responses are going to look like, but if anybody has a mini transfer station in the state, please send me some information on what it looks like and how it runs. And that's all I have.
Okay. Interesting. Anyone else? All right. EIERA update. Is Kristen in the house?
I am here.
Hey, good.
Unfortunately, I don't have any new projects to tell you guys about, which is really weird because in spite of COVID, I've been talking with at least a half dozen pretty interesting ideas that I hope will come to fruition shortly. I would say I did get out yesterday. I went up to St. Louis to look at St. Louis Composting's new indoor facility. It's not fully operational yet. And I'm going to just encourage everyone, when you hear that he's having an open house, you need to go check this site out. I think we're really leading the way in the nation in food waste recovery. You will recall that we helped them buy 2 different types of food depackagers. Both of these will be going into this warehouse property now. They'll be able to run a wet line and a dry line. And, you know, you're just always amazed when you learn about food waste, but the truckloads and truckloads and truckloads of food that come into that facility are absolutely amazing. So I think it's pretty impressive what Patrick's going to be able to accomplish there for that St. Louis area, and he's getting trucks from all over. It's not just the St. Louis area. It's pretty fascinating. But I'd also add there too that him, like every other composter that we have worked with, has done very well through the COVID period. People are at home and putting compost and mulch on their flowers, I suppose. So, and it's a mixed bag with our other projects.
Very good. That's interesting. Sounds like a candidate for a road trip if we ever get to do those kinds of
Oh
things.
yeah, I mean, you know, he says he'll definitely have an open house, but then you kind of think, well, yeah, but you know, when is that going to be safe for us all to gather and look at your stuff? So I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Kristen, very much. Any questions for Kristen? Comments? All right. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, I can't believe this, but is next year's meeting dates. This year has just gone, which I'm not altogether unhappy about. If it has to be like it is, let's just let it go. So, four meetings select, and then some optional meetings, and you know, taking into account the winter weather and that sort of thing. So, I think we generally don't try to meet in January, generally, which would then put the emphasis on February or March in that first. Kent? Oh, okay. I saw hands, so generally we try to do at least one in that first quarter, and we kind of think in terms of the legislative sessions and that sort of thing as well. So we've typically met in February, first quarter, one of the mandatory, and then March is a backup in case we have either weather problems or stuff gets really hot in the legislature. We feel like we need to be there. That again, that's just an idea. February is the mandatory. And then in the April, May, June, I think probably, I believe May would be probably almost for certain we would need to be together in May, with perhaps April. July and August. And I believe we typically try to meet in one of those months. I believe perhaps August. August kind of sets us up for September, which is getting ready for the session and kind of pre-session. And then we've got September, let's see, June, July, August, October. We get into September, October, and November since we don't meet in December. And this year we're meeting in October and November with the idea of business to attend to. We have the annual report that we need to look at and then finalize. And either one of those, I think probably November would be for sure. That gives us the most time as far as reports and that sort of thing. So I'm just throwing this out, and staff, please correct me if this doesn't make sense too. I believe we said February and May. November. What do y'all think?
Barbara, you're cutting out. I only heard February and May.
Okay, I'm sorry. February, May, September, and November. Is that clearer? Is that better?
Yeah, I heard that. I didn't see a September date on the agenda.
We normally don't do a September date with the holiday.
Oh. All right, no. It's right after Labor Day. It's October and November. Again, because we had some things that we needed to do, and that kind of springboards us into the legislative session. October and November.
I think you cut out again.
May. Okay. I had February, May, and then we've got to stretch all the way to October and November. And it would seem to me that this year we met in August. And October and November was mandatory, but October was optional. February, May, August, and November. Am I coming through okay now?
Yeah, I could hear you that time.
Okay. February, May, August, and November, with October being a backup in case we need it.
Well, Barbara, I would suggest we do October as the mandatory and then have November as the backup. Does that make sense?
Either way.
I mean, if we cancel, unless we know ahead of time that we're going to cancel November, we'd have to meet October for sure to meet the statutory guidelines.
Okay. I like that. I mean, this year it's worked out perfectly because the stuff we have to report on and getting ready for the session, we talked about it in October. If by chance we get it all done and everything. But if we need the extra time, November. I like that.
So I would make a motion.
February, May.
Yeah, I think you're cutting out again, Barbara, but I think what you're saying is the required meetings would be February, May, August, and October would be the required 4, and then the rest of them can stay as presented unless weather or other circumstances intervene. So I would make that motion for next year's.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second for that? Then we can discuss it.
I'll second it. It's Dave Beal.
Thank you, Dave. All right, is there other discussion on this? And I'll ask staff, does this sound reasonable for you all?
Going to reserve the rooms just in case.
I already have them all reserved.
All right,
Great.
then.
All right, any further discussion? All right, those in favor of that meeting schedule, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All right, and anyone opposed, please say no. All right, motion carries. We have our schedule for next year. Thank you very much. In the heading of unfinished business, am I okay now? Can you hear me? I'm not seeing any little circles, so hopefully everything's settled down on my end.
Yeah, you're coming through. I think we had a few extra people that were off of mute and it was causing a little bit of feedback.
Okay. All right, that might be. We have two items that we need to talk about today that we've been working on. The annual report, which we'll take up second, and the legislative priorities document, which we're going to take up first. And just as a bit of a reminder, you've received both of these. This is the first time I believe you've seen the annual report, but you have seen the legislative priorities document before, and we had talked about it. We had kind of talked about it at the last meeting and then asked for comments and that sort of thing. And so we got some edits back and some comments. We've incorporated those. And one of the things we did, since there's no joint committee seated, we changed the first part of it so that it's more general as opposed to just being titled that it's for the joint committee. We kind of, I think, broadened the scope of this a little bit so that this is more of a general document that talks about our priorities and our values. And it's designed to be kind of a reference piece. What is SWAB? What do we stand for? What are our values? So that if I'm a legislator and someone is proposing some kind of a bill that has to do with solid waste, I would look at this and I would see, number one, there is a body that discusses this. And number two, here are some of the things that they consider important. And then number three, I would see that there are people I could ask, there are people I could talk to. So this would be something that, yes, it would go to the joint committee when it's reseated, of course, but it also might go to your local legislator so that if they have perhaps a penchant for supporting recycling or something like that, or we find some other friendly legislator that may not have anything to do with the joint committee, but he's kind of headed in that direction, this is something that would give them more information and help support what they're trying to do. So as much as anything, this document is designed to be a resource. And the second part of that then is to pull some things out of that, to create an action item or action steps or a do list, something that prioritizes some specific items that we could include, again, in a cover letter to the joint committee that says specifically, here are 3 things we would like to see you all take forward in this session, or something of that manner. I've been talking with Chris and Brady, and we have been looking at the legislative priority, this document. We've looked at the annual report. We've also looked at the Red Tape Reduction Act comments, which are included in the annual report. And we've kind of bringing all of those things together with the idea that we can pull some of the things out of all of these documents as well as input from members, but we can pull some of these things together that we might be able to identify some items that we could actually work on and get done. Not everything requires legislative action. So if we can find some things that we get consensus on that are doable, that can be done internally from an administrative standpoint, and in particular, when we begin to look at the RTR list, as Chris mentioned, that has kind of set there because we were waiting to see what the joint committee was, what their role was going to be and what they wanted to do or whatever. And of course, time ran out on that. So there's one prime document. But to get together this working list, and Chris is going to speak here in just a minute with some of the ideas, some things, just a broad scattering of some ideas. But in the next month, and I also pulled up some of the past bills because there were some bills left on the table at the last session that we felt like would have been to our benefit to pass. And also, I want to mention that this is a fluid document. This is like a to-do list. You know, you put a to-do list together and you say immediate items, something that's going to take me an hour I could do, something that's going to take all the planets aligning may take a little longer. That's kind of the idea behind this, so that we have a smaller number, things we could try to accomplish, and a little more specific. Once we kind of get this working together, and again, we have a start that Chris is going to talk about. And then before the next meeting, we're kind of going to fine tune that a little bit. So anyone that has any input, if you have an idea, or if you would like to be a part of this little group that's going to kind of work on this, please let Chris know, or me, and or Brady, because we're looking for input. We're looking for ideas at this point. So with that, Chris just got on the phone. So any questions to this point? I hope that made sense. I hope I haven't thoroughly confused you.
No, I think, like Barbara said, we have our standing legislative philosophy, so to speak, that started in 2016. It's a broad-based 8-priority generalization that we can use if legislation comes up. The group's already voted on it. We know what our positions are. We don't have to talk about it with all the districts. The next list that we're just starting to craft is an actual sort of shelf-ready list is, I guess, the best way to explain it. You know, if a legislator comes up and says, you know, I'm a recycling fan, what do you guys support? We can actually hand them a piece of legislation and say, we would like for you to introduce this. Sort of a priority list for us. Just some of the items that have been suggested so far. Of course, reestablishment of the Joint Committee on Solid Waste District Operations is a priority. The second one is legislation for the Product Stewardship Institute. We know there's been a lot of work specifically on paint statewide. It's getting, well, I haven't attended many of the meetings, but it's apparently getting closer to a point where we can introduce legislation to make that happen. So I've requested the most recent piece of that legislation so we can have that ready. The next item is sort of a carryover from the last couple of years, and that is electronics recycling legislation. The Missouri Recycling Association worked for many years to draft, redraft, and redraft again electronic recycling legislation. I think when Bill Gunther left, that might have fallen to the wayside. and we're just really looking at dusting that off to see whether that has any legs or any support with the board. And that's a third priority. The next one is lithium-ion battery disposal. And that's looking at if there's any legislation that needs to be had. We know lithium-ion production and use is on the rise. We know it's dangerous for haulers, for landfill operators, for transfer station operators, for packer truck drivers, for citizens who are potentially throwing it in the trash as opposed to dealing with it appropriately. So we're looking to see if there's an opportunity there. Reintroduction of the right to repair legislation, which was HB 2369 in the 2020 legislative meetings. So we're looking at whether we need to support that, add, subtract to it, get behind it. Reestablishing, connecting the tipping fee back to the consumer price index, which used to be true and is currently not happening. Increasing the state recycling rate 40% to 75%, which has been on the list for many years. And reintroducing modification of the solid waste forfeiture funds handling from general GR to post-closure fund. And that's SB 822 currently. Those are sort of the list of items that have floated to the surface. And by the time we get to the next meeting, I will ship this to Barbara and Brady. They will edit it, add, subtract, and we'll try to get this out to the group so people can actually see what the list is, and we can start the conversation in November to see where we'd like to go with it, if anywhere. We also have some sort of monitoring items, items that we really need to pay attention to, keeping yard waste out of the landfill, prohibiting plastic bag bans, making sure that closed landfills have adequate resources as long as it doesn't tap into grant money or district money or DNR money existing. And that's really the sort of brief overview. It's only a one-page document so far. So I will ship this out and we'll sort of start the conversation and then be looking for specific pieces of legislation to address these items so that we can sort of be a little bit more aggressive maybe with legislative items if the opportunity presents itself. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Barbara, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. As you peruse the legislative priorities and also as you look through the annual report, the RTR, if you have ideas, please send those to us. And again, at this point, we're gathering information. We're going to have a big list, and then we'll start. We may even be able to consolidate and kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone in some of these. But we will be kind of as an ongoing project working these down and trying to find some things that we can accomplish. Comments or questions?
Barbara, I did miss a section on the RTR. Specifically, that's the Red Tape Reduction Act or project that we've been working on for a couple of years. It's attached to attachment C, I think, to the annual report. That's on a list of items that are administrative in nature. Probably, we don't know that for sure, but if things are administrative, I think SWAB can just work with the department, get those changes made and get them off the books and move on. The legislation obviously takes a different path, but that's one of the sections I forgot to mention. So thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, very good. Any more questions or comments? All right. If not, we'll move to the annual report. It is that time of the year. this is the first time that you all have seen this. I would encourage you to take a look at this. And I know we sent it out yesterday. You may have not have had a chance to read all of it. But does anyone have any questions or comments at this time?
Barbara, this is Chris again. Hate to dominate conversation, but I did have a question. I noticed that 3 of the districts, F, J, and T, did not provide information on the annual report when it came to grant projects. And I think the grant project list is really helpful for the legislators and people across the state to actually see what's being funded. Maybe they can send it to their environmental groups and think of ways to divert material that, they don't have to recreate the wheel. They can look at this grant and say, hey, we can do this locally. But I was just curious as if we had a communication problem or if F, J, and T didn't have any grants this year, or if there's any other reason why we missed that information.
Barbara, Derek Stanley here. I can address that if you'd like me to.
Sure.
Okay. Just as a note, all of our grants are published on our website. So, I mean, and they're all literally the entire grant is there. It seems like we have this annual report a little bit turned around. We file all of this with the state of Missouri every year. It seems like that once we get that filed with the state of Missouri, then it could be compiled from the state rather than having the districts go out and, I mean, we're, for FNT, we are private contractors. Nobody's paying us extra to go gather up this information apart from our job with the state and put it together for the districts. Moreover, our board has not authorized us to go do stuff to report to the state legislature. I think the Attorney General just showed up at the last meeting and kind of set that a little bit straight for us. We're supposed to be reporting out to the director of DNR and to the Joint Committee when they are convened. It seems like we're getting a little over our skis. Make note of that.
Well, the legislation actually states that we should produce an annual report for any state committee of the legislature that meets on any solid waste topic. It doesn't really say specifically that it's for the joint task force. I guess if the districts don't want to cooperate, we could say they refuse to submit information instead of no information was submitted. I suppose that's an option.
Or you can just grab it from the state because we file the exact information with the state, or you can download it from our website.
Well, I think that's what the board is asking the districts to report that information, I think is what's happening. There's no reason why you have to comply. I mean, you can simply say you refuse to answer.
We're not refusing to answer. It's on our website. You can get it if you want it, Chris.
As I see this, the legislation asks us to prepare the report. Our report is not complete unless we have everybody's information. And Derek, everybody else is furnishing the information. It's a part of this report, has been since we started it. And I really think yours should be included in it as well. We shouldn't have to go to your website to get your information.
I will ask my board if they want us to compile that information, but they need to review what it is that your priorities are to the state. And, I would recommend all districts go back to their executive boards and make sure their executive boards are signing off on all the stuff that are going into this.
This is specifically stated in the legislation that asks us to give this report. This information is included on the list of topics.
I understand, Barbara, but the Attorney General did come and speak to us about this. I mean, it seems like we're just completely disregarding everything he said to us.
I have a feeling that the Attorney General was talking about legislating from the districts, not reporting this information, but I wasn't at the meeting. Anyway, I'm hopeful that we will have a complete report, Chris, in answer to your question.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? As I say, please take a close look at this. And Angie Snyder with District O, OHRD, has compiled all this and has worked very hard, as have the other planners, to get us their information and to get this all in one comprehensive document. So if you have comments or you have changes or edits or anything, I would appreciate being copied on it, but you can certainly feel free to send those directly to Angie. And next month, then we will look at this with the idea of approving it, since our deadline to get it submitted is first of the year. And we typically approve them in November. So
I did want to say thanks to Angie for doing
yes,
doing all this work and compiling it. I'm sure it's difficult getting information from 20 districts simultaneously and putting it together. So thanks, Angie. I appreciate your work.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions or comments? All right. The next item on the and we'd like to ask if there is any members from the public who would like to have an opportunity to comment on any other issues that are pertinent to Solid Waste Advisory Board at this time. Hearing no response, I'm going to assume there is none. Our next meeting is November the 4th at 1 o'clock. And I think, again, we'll have WebEx. I think this has worked well for everybody. I like sharing the documents. I like seeing people's faces. I think this is a good way to do this.
Barbara, I did have one additional item for business, and I'm not really sure where it's gone, maybe open comment.
Okay.
But I was wanting to have a conversation at the board level, maybe in November, maybe January. I don't know that it's pressing right now, but I was thinking that we should take a look at the rules for the Solid Waste Advisory Board when it comes to officers specifically serving and the term limits that are mentioned. And my thought process is typically for organizations, it's good to have turnover, but also with smaller organizations, it's a little bit difficult when you have a smaller pool of people, because I know it takes a lot of time to serve as president and vice president, or chair and vice chair, I think in this case. My suggestion is that the board members think about either doubling the term limits. I think we have a 2-term limit, which is 1 year each. So I think it's a 2-year limit. Is that right, Chris Noggle, or is that a 4-year limit?
Chris, I think you're correct, but I don't have it right in front of me. And clarification, you're talking about the bylaws.
The bylaws specifically. So what what the actual rule is not relevant right now, but I certainly appreciate the work Barbara and Brady have done. I just don't really see any reason to limit their terms unless we had a reason to. So I think if the board members could actually, if Ashley, you wouldn't mind sending out that information about the term limits, I would appreciate that. If that's okay with you, Madam Chair, and then maybe in November, January, we'll have a chat about it and see if extending those or eliminating those is helpful, because if we get on a roll and make some progress, I really don't want a rule to stop that. So that's my only comment.
All right, we can get that information and then we can look at it. At the February meeting, I'll make a note for the February agenda. Is that work?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Agenda items for November 4. We will have the final approval of the annual report and the legislative priorities, and then the further discussion of the action items. And we're also, Lisa McDaniel has offered a program for us, which I think sounds very interesting. Gail Hubert with EPA Region 7. Lisa and her group has been working with her on developing a workshop series on recycling market development. And one of the things that they have done, they've collected quite a lot of information, and they have a map. And this, I think, is something that God knows we need market development. So I think this is going to be something that's very interesting, and I'm certainly applauding the effort. So Gail Hubert will be with us as our presentation on the November 4th meeting. Thank you, Lisa. Does anyone else have anything number 4 agenda at this time? Appreciate everybody coming, calling in. Are there any other comments or questions before we close out the meeting? Okay. Again, I thank you. I thank you for taking the time away from this beautiful October day. And if there is nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, Chris
I think
made the
that was-
motion. Do we have, I'm sorry.
I think that was
Leland
Brady
second?
Brady made the motion, and I'll second it.
All right,
Correct.
Brady and Chris. All right, those in favor say aye and goodbye.
Aye.
Aye and goodbye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
We are adjourned.